to you for the okay. When in fact the information that I'm going to share with you is really good for nothing.
Get what we pay for.
Probably could, yeah, that's right. Could have worded that a little bit different, but you're right, Esther. Anywho, I'm not going to start with a prayer today, but I would like to start with the understanding that I think we acknowledge that we're two or three of us are gathered together, working on our God and faith relationships, that God will be there with us as well. And so, in essence, I guess that is my prayer, that we understand that. So what I'm talking about today is the Passover account that we know, the Exodus from Egypt. And I shared with you that I kind of put this together over the COVID years, so I saved all kinds of ideas. And this may get kind of choppy, so I hope you can kind of bear with me, but I hope, again, it's still worth the time that you're spending with me today, okay, even though we may be bouncing around a little bit. I will warn you ahead of time, there's 3 points that I'd like to have you take away. Maybe you should write these down because I may not make those points throughout the presentation, and you're going to need to go back and remember it. One of them is, I believe that the plagues can be viewed as a battle of the gods, and that they may also have been natural, ordinary occurrences. I'd also like to try and convey to you that the early Jewish community of Christians, I don't know what to call these people, Messianic Jews or whatever, because when you call them Christians, it's kind of like who we are, but these guys were Jews who were talking to other Jews about this Jewish guy. And the only way that they could seemingly communicate information about what they had seen in this person that they were calling the Christ was to communicate it in Jewish terms. So hopefully we can see that too, okay? And then the other thing is that I think the fact of the matter is it's now, and I think it will always be. There's a tension between our experiences and our expectation. Okay, what the Israelites may have experienced through this whole Passover Exodus experience, they could only explain with their understanding and knowledge of their world, which was a world that was pre-Galileo, pre-Copernicus, pre-Hubble telescope. And so their explanation of their experience fits into that kind of a groove, okay? And that maybe our experiences have to be explained in a totally different way. And I'd like to see the church start doing that. This is a part of, again, we're going to try and see in between the lines. I don't know if you stare at this. I don't know whether this works from a distance. But if you look at the center point in that middle square, okay, there's sometimes that square comes out off the surface. But if you hang in there for a while, that square goes in. And that's kind of, I guess, the way I'm looking at these stories a little bit too. Sometimes it's this, oh no, sometimes it's that. Anyways, so that's how we'll look at the Passover event, okay? There's more to it than what initially meets the eyes. And then I shared with you last week too that I'm trying to come to this, and I'm hoping that you're receiving this information, okay? As somebody who's accepting me from my background and my experiences, which are totally different than your background and your experiences, okay? So take this with a grain of salt, I guess, if you will. Chew on it, spit it out if it doesn't work, digest it and make it a part of you if it does. This is another image in terms of, again, looking at these stories in the Bible. There's actually 2 women in this picture, and I don't know whether you can see it. Okay, one of them is an old hag that's kind of looking down. Okay, there's another woman in this picture. technology, okay? This is her nose. That's her eyelash. This is her ear. And she's looking backwards. Oh, okay. Did you get that? Help me. Okay, technology, here we go. All right, so anyways, you got that picture. But again, it's a way of seeing pictures inside of pictures. I think the Jews were storytellers. That was how they conveyed information to each other. And it's kind of interesting that Jesus was a storyteller. And why, when his disciples came along to kind of convey their information about this guy they call the Christ, why wouldn't they tell stories too? We'll get into some of that, okay? Let's get back to the Exodus, the Passover story. These are some Egyptian imagery. I don't know whether you can see this. This is kind of light, but there's actually a god arching over the top here. The gods were in the heavens. They were up, okay? Pharaoh and his community. By the way, if you see a circle like this means this guy's a god or a holy person. It's kind of like a halo in Renaissance paintings, okay? And then we've got a world that lives in the underground over here. So the world was viewed as a layer cake, a 3-layer cake. God's up there, we're all here, and whatever's going on down there kind of thing. Oops, where's my cursor? This thing's great. Here's another kind of close-up of that same thing, so that you get an understanding of how they may have perceived the world. Interesting too, that as they looked at the sky, they saw the stars, and they saw the gods in the heavens. And you know, our communication nowadays hasn't really changed a whole lot. When we talk about people who are almost larger than life, we talk about the stars in sports. We talk about the stars on the silver screen. The stars on the silver screen live in Hollywood. You guys don't sound like you believe in that. Okay, but we celebrate holidays, holy days, okay? Anyways, so you can see that, you know, there's that God, again, arching over, creating kind of a dome over the world that lived in between, with the underworld there too. Okay, so I think we've got that. It's interesting to see how our perceptions and our explanations change. Gods live in the sky, okay? For millennia, this kind of thinking went on, right? If you remember the disciples in describing Jesus' ascension, he ascended up into heaven. How could it be any other place, right? That's where the gods were. Centuries later, we've got Galileo and Copernicus still trying to convince the church that God might not be up. That all changes when you live on a ball, because depending on where you are at any given time, up might be down. Anyways, for what that's worth. Here's an interesting concept. Our patron saint, Martin Luther. Okay, Martin Luther was 9 years old when Columbus discovered America, when this guy was trying to prove that the world wasn't flat. Anyways, one other thing in terms of thoughts, concepts, perceptions dying slow. Tonight, pay attention as you watch your college-educated weather meteorologist. He will probably announce to you that the sun set at 7:35, and tomorrow morning the sun will rise at 6:52. Right? Sun doesn't rise and the sun doesn't set. Our world turns. Okay, our world is not radiating around. Anyways, okay. Old thoughts die hard. With the Egyptians, many of the natural world items, they worshipped the created, not the creator. All right. We know of the cows, the golden calf story. If you can see the golden calves, going to make a shift here, okay? What I want to shift to is it's a God thing. My family has a familiar line. It's often used. It's a God thing. We're referring to basically seeing God working in things or events in our lives that we had actually no idea of at the time, but you look back on it, okay? I've heard it said that coincidence is an event in which God chooses to remain anonymous. Wow, that was a real coincidence. Oh, yeah, that was a God thing, maybe, kind of. Have you ever read that? I think it's a poem, I don't know, about footprints in the sand. You know, there were two footprints or whatever, me and God walking together, and all of a sudden there was only one footprint in the sand. I was all alone or whatever, and then I realized it was God who was carrying me, okay? That's kind of seeing God in all that is. I was taught in school that the first 5 books of Moses, another little shift in thought here, okay, the Bible, were written by Moses. I'm not going to tell you when that was that I went to school, but I can tell you that my professors had gone to seminary before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found too. So anyways, and it's interesting that those accounts written by Moses include things that happened way, way, way before his time, includes his birth. Hey, I couldn't write a story about my birth other than maybe what my parents had told me. And it includes the story of his death. Interesting, okay? I've since learned that through archaeology, forensic science, scriptural analysis, almost handwriting analysis, if you will, that these texts may very well have been written during the Assyrian or Babylonian captivity, right? Looking back at the history of the Jews and seeing God's hand working through all of that. It's kind of like the TV program, if anybody's watched it, Forensic Files, where they're solving murders and crimes because of new DNA evidence or because of blood spatter investigation or whatever. Okay, so going with that thought, this is a timeline, a chronology of what people, at least in our experience, are explaining this. These numbers over here on the left-hand side, these numbers over here on the left-hand side, I hope the people can see that left-hand side.
It's a tiny little area.
Yeah, okay, all right. It says 500 BC, 450, 400. There's a 1 in front of those numbers, okay? So this is 1,500 years before the Common Era. This is 1,450 years before the Common Era. 1,400 years before, okay? This is where they envision the Exodus to be. Where'd my cursor go? There he is, okay? This is another chronology that kind of covers Israel's history. If you see right here, 586, 539 is the Babylonian rule, okay? If the Exodus happened in 1450, and this happened in maybe 500 or whatever, we're talking about 1,000 years difference, okay? Between maybe when these writings were produced about the stories that they were talking about. That's pretty interesting and creates an awful lot of artistic license for the writers. And I think I want to say now too, and I'm going to maybe kind of plug in on this, okay? We talk about inspiration and we talk about inerrancy of the Bible. And I'll try and make this clear. I don't know whether I can, but chew this with me a little bit. And if you don't like what it says, let's have a conversation. We'll continue to talk a little bit longer on it. But inspired writing, in my point of view, does not require a literal historic documentation of facts. Okay? Just take the word inspire. Really kind of when you break that up into pieces, it's breathed into. I really believe that God breathed into the stories conveyed to us in the Bible truths about life and about the relationship we have with God. I'm not certain I'm going to go as far as to say that it's literal. The other thing that we need to know here is, I guess, there's the timeline, I kind of crossed it out. If we go from 586, the Babylonian rule, it's circled there, to this Babylonian rule, to the Roman rule, this is Jesus' time. Okay, we're talking about 500 years now, when the guys were starting to write about Jesus, kind of thing. What we're talking about, I don't know whether you've noticed or how well I've publicized the fact that, but I'm trying to talk about a reformation of a theology. Ooh, wow, I need to go back to that. A reformation of a theology. What I just explained to you, I think, is at least 3 different reformations of theology. Okay, we've got the Exodus from Egypt, where they reformed, and I don't want to say Reformation, because that's Luther. Okay, we got one spot in history where the Reformation happened. But the reformation of a theology was when these Jewish people said, there aren't a whole lot of gods. Okay, the Lord our God is one. Reformation of a theology that was happening there. Okay, when we get to the Babylonian rule, there's actually some verses in Second Isaiah where they talk about, well, they couldn't figure out if we are the chosen people, if God is our God and we are chosen, how would he ever allow this to happen? For the temple to be destroyed, the city to be laid waste in ruins, and us being captive in a strange land. And they had to figure out, how do I deal with my God relationship now? And there was a reformation of a theology that was going on there. Okay, let's take it one more step. Go to the Roman rule. And what we've got is this group of Jews who identify with this one that they call the Christ. And it's like, how do we describe now this God that we've seen in human form? The God that we've experienced in our daily lives. And there is another reformation of a theology going on there. Oh, well, anyways, done. This is kind of a fun verse for me. Another switch in gears, another right-hand turn. When Moses was getting the 10 Commandments, he asked of God, can I see your face? Can I see your glory? And there's a neat little scene that goes on there. You guys all know this stuff or whatever, okay? God kind of tells him that nobody has ever seen my face and lived, but I'll do a favor for you. There's a cleft in the rock over there, okay? You go in that spot, I'll put my hand over it, and I'll walk by. And when I walk by, you can see my backside. Let your mind go with that one. I'm not certain that Moses actually saw God's little hinder, okay? But I do think that in hindsight, Moses was able to see God working. It's almost as though God was saying, you will get to see my shadow. You will get to see where I've been. You will get to see the course that I'm traveling in your history here, okay? It's where God's will has been done, where the divine has met with the human and the natural world. It's a God thing, if you will, okay? It's where, if you remember John's little note from last time we talked, it's where God meets us in the ordinary. One of the Old Testament guys, Joseph, if you remember that story too, goes through all of these ordeals of being sold by his brother, winded up in Egypt, Potiphar's wife, gets thrown in jail and all this kind of stuff. He meets with his brothers at the end. They're scared to death of what this guy can do to them right now. Okay. And he said, God meant it for good. Joseph was able to see how God had worked in his whole past to create these good things in his life and the life of his brothers and sisters. Okay, anyways, ordinary natural occurrences. Let's try. Oh, here's John's thing. Ordinary blessed gifts of our world. If you remember, we even talked about this last week too, in saying, you know, it's in the waters of baptism that we were baptized, but the water's all gone. It's in the bread and wine that we eat, and it's all consumed. And it's in the people with whom we have shared this space and this time, some of whom now are gone. So there's the concept. Let me rant for a little bit here too. In terms of literal interpretation or in terms of breathing into, it is not hard for me to take, I guess I don't want to, I don't want to go from God created these miracles in the plagues to free these people, as much as maybe God had used ordinary means to do that. And if you think of our world, we are living on a ball in space that's rotating at 1,000 miles an hour. And we're not flying off. And if you go down in our world, you'll get water. And if you go down a little farther, it's on fire. And if you look at the way our little ball in space is orchestrated, it's on a tilt. So that the farthest points on this ball are far enough away from our sun that it freezes, creating just enough space for anything in between for us to grow and have life. This kind of blows me away. The point I'm trying to make, I guess, if I haven't made it, is that in ordinary life, miracles are happening all the time. I'm talking about the world that's outside of me. I can talk about a world that's inside of me as well. I can breathe through this tube, but I can eat through this tube. And what's going on when I eat that keeps that food from going in my lungs, but it makes it go to my stomach? How is that being controlled? I went to bed last night, slept for 8 hours. I mean, it was almost as though I was dead. I woke up again. Oh, what kept me alive? How is it that I kept breathing? How is it that my heart kept beating? How is it that blood kept getting oxygen? God didn't create miracles necessarily for Egypt. The miracles are happening every day in our lives. Let's go through this real quick too. What I want to do is show you some of the gods of Egypt. All right. I want you to look at some spots in these pictures, and it basically is the heads. Okay. One of the things that's going on with the heads is that these guys are rams, sheep, lambs. Okay, a ram-headed god. Okay, if we, oops, I just missed one that I think I want to go back to. How do I go back? I think I blew it.
Yeah. I mean, again.
Next, okay, wait. There, this guy. This is actually a carving on a wall. If you look at this guy, okay, this is the second plague. This guy's a frog god. Okay, I think a frog was a good news kind of a guy. It was almost like butterflies are to the Christians. Okay, they could live in water, but they could live in land, kind of thing. Okay, the first plague, if you think about it, was the Nile being turned into blood. If we want to think about this on a natural occurrence, I don't know whether, and I've been down in Naples, Florida, for several marches in the spring. March, not marches. March in the spring, and they've had a problem with red algae if you've ever heard about that. Red algae almost wiped out the sport fishing industry down there because it kills the fish. So let's just think that maybe red algae kind of occurred in the Nile here. Okay, looks a lot like blood. The fish are dying. They're winding up on the shore. The Nile overflows its banks, which it always did. That's how they viewed it as a fertility god, right? You could see very definitely in the land where it overflowed with green vegetation, it was lush. Where it ended, desert. Okay, so now it's overflowing with all these dead fish. Then it recedes, and the dead fish are all over the place. Okay. By the way, what are the frogs going to do in that? Frogs are going to head out of the water and wind up on the land as well. Okay. The earliest miraculous works were actually matched by the Egyptians, by the way, too. The water, they did it. The staff on, turning into a snake, they did it. The frogs were kind of an interesting one. There's kind of a humorous side of this too. And this is a matter of, do you believe in Moses or not? Verse 10 of Exodus 8 says, this is regarding the frogs, so that you may know that there is no one like the Lord our God. The frogs shall leave you and your houses and your officials and your people, and they shall be left in the Nile. You believe that? All right. Then what actually happens? 3 verses later, the frogs died in the houses, the courtyards. They died in the fields, and they gathered them together in heaps, and the land stank. Moses' credibility was a little bit questionable at this point in time. Okay, I love that line, and the land stank. So anyways, we've got the frogs, they're dying. What comes after? We got all these dead fish. We got all these dead frogs that are there, okay? What comes next? The vermin, all right? Wouldn't the swamp rats or the river rats, I've been in Boston already, and they got river rat problems along their riverfront. So the rats come out, now starting eating all this dead stuff that's over there. 2 weeks later, after the rats are done with it, we've got flies and lice that are all over the place or whatever. We've got hail and locusts. That's a natural occurrence in Africa, all right? We got boils on cattle. Well, we know that cattle is one of the gods, the cow, okay? And we got darkness over the land. I don't know what this one could be, but the darkness was it was thick. Is it possible that actually it was just this deep, dense fog and nobody could kind of see anything? The sun, which was a god, by the way, for the Egyptians, was obscured, okay? So they couldn't see light and they couldn't see each other, whatever. And then we've got the final one, the death of the firstborn. I've just experienced 2 or 2.5 years of COVID. If you were an Egyptian in 1450 and all of a sudden these people are dying, and predominantly they happen to be old. I mean, that's kind of how you would almost define it, right? How would I interpret that other than maybe these guys that were old, they're all the firstborn, maybe, huh? Oh, okay, I'll buy that. And then there's Amun-Ra. That's, I don't know whether you buy into that. That's a conversation we can have maybe out at the picnic table this summer, this spring, whatever. But there's a little bit of a different understanding of the plagues. But the Jews believed that the Spirit of God was in the wind, the breath of God as in Genesis, and God breathed into man the breath of life. The early Jews were wandering nomads, living in tents. They would go to bed at night and the sand dune would be over there. They would wake up in the morning and the sand dune was over there. God was working in their world. Sometimes I wonder that maybe they had a better understanding of God working in their world than we do here, okay? After the 4th plague, we got the flies or whatever in the land. I don't know where I'm at here. I'm a little bit lost. Okay, let's do just couple more quickies. I want to hit the ram. This is the last guy, okay? The ram was a major god in Egypt. Ramses was what they called many of the pharaohs, okay? And he was an incarnation of the ram, okay, the god Amun-Ra. And if an individual that you experience had power and authority over the productivity in the land, and even in your life or death, you might believe he was a god too. It's not too long ago in pre-World War II Japan, they kind of thought that. Maybe Mao in China, I don't know whether they elevate him to a god level, but he certainly had godlike powers, okay? Maybe Rocket Man in North Korea. Say no to them and see what happens. They have control over all of life in those situations. Anyways, Aries in the zodiac is a constellation of stars, the ram, okay? Aries, up here, do I have any Aries in the group here? There you go. That's the first of the year, that's the...
I'm just reading about it.
Okay, it's the high sign from what I understand in the zodiac.
First sign.
First sign, first, okay?
Considered to be the governing period.
Yeah, okay.
March 21st to April 19th.
Oh, thank you, ma'am. Anyways, so we've got the zodiac. Now, what, okay. Let me get back. I'm lost on my screen. Here we go, okay. A full moon during the period of Aries is when Aries is at its most powerful and influential phase. Interesting. Full moon. Do you remember at all? Okay, Passover is celebrated on the first full moon of spring. Okay, during the period when Aries, the ram god, is in its peak of strength and influence. I'll just throw this out. I think even woven into this, okay, I'm of the opinion, and I've come to the conclusion, I suppose, that the actions that the Jews were asked to perform on the night of the first Passover was an act of sedition. I looked up sedition, and it says conduct or speech inciting people to rebel against the authority of a state or monarch. Okay. I think that God, through Moses, might have been asking the Jewish people to take a stand, make a decision, and make it public. Are you with me or are you not? If so, let's see it. Kill the symbol of the preeminent God of Egypt. Take its blood and paint it on your doorpost for all the world to see, and then eat it. Oh, what if the act of painting blood on a doorpost of the lamb, okay, was actually an act of willful defiance, a subversive act? What if the Jews were painting the blood of the Egyptians? Okay, we went through that. We've kind of experienced these kinds of people who had to make a stand. I don't know, politicians. Wow, are we experiencing one of them even now? I don't know. Yeah. This is one of my favorite slides in life right now. This was produced by a Lutheran pastor of all people. And down here underneath this line, all these white lines that are going down are chapters in the Bible, okay? This, I believe, is the separation of the Testaments. It doesn't look quite right. Oh, I don't think this is, I think I know what this one is, and this one's gonna come up in Shavuot, Pentecost, if we get a chance to talk about it, okay? It sounds, but anyways, so these are all of the chapters. What these lines do is connect information in that chapter to information that's related somewhere else in the Bible. Okay, the farther away that or the closer the relationship, the lower the arc, and I think the more purplish and bluish it is. The farther away it is, the longer and the higher the line gets, kind of thing. The point that I'm trying to make here is the Bible, Biblia, means little books. It's a bunch of little books assembled together, produced by a wide variety of authors from a wide variety of locations in a wide variety of times. And yet, there are relationships woven throughout that whole thing. That whole thing meaning throughout the Bible. Okay. New Testament reflections. Yeah, I'm going to skip this if you don't mind. Now, Joyce, I don't know what I want to do here. Okay, I'm going to click through slide by slide by slide because I won't be able to find myself otherwise. Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time. Joseph was a dreamer. I guess I'll stop here. Talking about a little bit of Old Testament stuff. I want to relate him to Moses because we're talking about the Exodus. But it's interesting. Joseph was a dreamer. Who am I talking about? When I say Moses was a dreamer, who's popping up in your head? Right? Old Testament Joseph or New Testament Joseph? Okay. Uh-oh.
Cedarburg Joseph.
So inside joke here, huh?
No, that Joseph.
Inside. All right, I don't know whether this applies to the Cedarburg Joseph, but anyway, okay. Joseph in history and Joseph in Matthew's gospel. Joseph saved the chosen people. If you remember, okay, the brothers, there was starvation going on. There was a famine in their land. They had to come to Egypt to get food. It was Joseph being in the position he was in to help save the chosen from starvation. Oh, okay. It was the Joseph in the New Testament who saved the chosen one from the wicked King Herod. How did he do it? You know, Joseph was a dreamer. Joseph in the Old Testament saved the chosen by moving them to Egypt. What did Joseph in the New Testament do? He moved them into Egypt, saved the chosen one. Joseph was wronged by his brothers, if you will, sold to them. And if you want to try this one out, Joseph of the New Testament could have been perceived as being wronged by his betrothed. I mean, what do you do when you've never had a relationship with your wife and she comes home and tells you she's pregnant? How do you deal with that one? Anyways, yeah, I know the Holy Spirit did it. Yeah. Okay. Joseph in the Old Testament had a forgiving spirit. And he told his brothers, God meant this all for good. And Joseph in the New Testament had a forgiving spirit too. He could have put her away privately, but he didn't. He took her on as his wife, and he raised her son, of who he had no idea who the father was, as his own.
We're not moving to Egypt.
Yeah, it's a rough crowd. It's getting rough. Anyways, Moses and Jesus. I want to try to switch gears and go to Moses now too, and just see if we can see some comparisons here. Moses and Jesus were both spared as infants from death of wicked and miserable kings. Moses crossed the Reed Sea, the Red Sea, or whatever, by parting the waters and walking through on dry land. Two other prominent leaders did this, by the way. This isn't unusual in Jewish Old Testament history. There was one guy called Joshua who took over from Moses. He was Moses's right-hand man, kind of deal. He took the chosen people into the promised land, and they had to cross the Jordan. And they crossed it with the Ark of the Covenant. And when the priests touched their feet in the water of the Jordan split, and they walked through on dry land. Okay, all right, it wasn't Moses, it was Joshua. But Jesus is Greek for the Hebrew name of Yeshua, Joshua. Kind of interesting. Here's another guy, Elijah. By the way, there's two prominent guys in Jewish and Old Testament history. It's the law and the prophets. It's Moses and Elijah. Who was Jesus found with on the Mount of Transfiguration? Moses and Elijah. Okay. Anyways, here's Elijah. Elijah's going to be taken up into heaven. On his way, he's taking his protege, Elisha, along with him. He takes his cloak, rolls it up, swacks the river, and the river splits, and they walk across on dry land. Okay. Elisha says, hey, this is pretty good stuff. I've been with you a long time. And Elijah says, what can I do for you? And he says, give me the same powers that you have, kind of thing. Okay. So Elijah goes into heaven in the fiery chariot. Elisha comes back with his cloak, hits the water, and the water's split. And he walks by again. Okay. Two figures in Old Testament Jewish history, splitting waters. Here's an interesting one in the New Testament about that guy that we call Jesus the Christ. And when Jesus had been baptized, just as he came up from the water, suddenly the heavens were opened to him. And then God says, a voice from heaven, this is my beloved son. Okay, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Jesus doesn't split the waters of the river. He splits the waters. He doesn't split it over the sea either. Jesus splits the waters of the heavens. That may not make a whole lot of sense unless we go back to the very beginning. A very good place to start. Okay. And God said, Genesis 1, folks. Okay. And God said, let there be a dome in the midst of the waters. Can you see this dome that we had talked about? This arching form that's up there? And let it separate waters from waters. Okay. So that God made this dome so that the waters under the dome in the land and the seas and the rivers were separated from the waters that fell from the sky. Okay. And Jesus basically separates the dome so that the waters parted, so to speak. That's pushing it. Yeah, okay, you aren't going to buy that. Let me work a little bit more. I got a couple more minutes here, folks, okay? After splitting the waters, Moses, after the Red Sea, goes into the wilderness for 40 years. Remember the number 4? It's a time of trial. It's a time of testing that they went on. Jesus goes into the wilderness for 40 days. In the wilderness, Moses is tempted basically 3 times. We'll go through those. And Jesus, we know, was tempted 3 times, okay? The first wilderness trial for Moses was there was a shortage of food, okay? And God provided them heavenly bread, manna. We know that story, okay? Bread from heaven. Jesus experiences the first temptation with Satan. If you are the Son of God, the devil says, command these stones to become loaves of bread. Interesting. And what does Jesus respond? One does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes out of the mouth of God. 2 things. He's talking bread. That's the obvious thing. The other one is we don't live by bread alone, but every word, the breath of God that comes out of God's mouth. Okay, we don't live by that alone, but by the breath of God. In Genesis 1, I've got a Jewish Bible. Okay, I shared this with people before. It doesn't say in the beginning God created. It says in the beginning of God's creating. He didn't do it once and let go. It's an ongoing process. God keeps calling your name, which is why we're all here. by the word of the Lord. Okay. Second wilderness temptation for Moses, it was a shortage of water. By the rock at Meribah, if you remember, he had to hit the rock, and when he hit the rock, water came out. But the verse that says there, he called the place called Meribah because the Israelites quarreled and tested the Lord. Okay, tested the Lord. New Testament verse. Jesus, his second temptation, the devil takes him up to the pinnacle on the temple. All right. If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down and let the angels have command over you. And Jesus' response is again, it's written, don't put your Lord to the test. Kind of interesting. 3, Moses. The last test he had was when he left to get the 10 Commandments, the people started worshiping the golden calf. Okay. They had created a new God for themselves. And Jesus, in his last and final temptation, the devil takes him on a high mountain where he gets to see all of the land. And he says, all of these things I'll give you if you'll fall down and worship me. And Jesus responds, it's written, worship the Lord your God and serve him only. I guess what I'm trying to convey here is that reaching back and forth, that Old Testament history, the Jewish history, was conveyed. The only thing that the Jews knew during the time of Jesus was that Bible, that Old Testament history. And the only way that they could convey this person that they identified as the Christ was to convey it through their Old Testament terminology. It was where their experience of this guy called Jesus had to somehow match their explanation. And the only way they could explain it was in Jewish terms. So, done. I think this last slide is the end. I would like to get some feedback from you, if you will. Part of what I had the papers and the pencils out for too was if you've got questions. You know, I never stop for you guys. I never allow you to. Hopefully, I get to the end and you forget the questions you have. But part of the problem is by me being up here, it looks as though I'm the authority. That's not the case. I wish we could sit in a circle so that everybody that kind of talked would have the floor, that we can kind of have this conversation together as opposed to me being responsible. But if you got any reaction to some of this stuff at all, let me know. Esther.
I had never thought of it in this way. That in the Passover, that it was the firstborn that was going to be executed. In my mind, it was always the babies in the household, but the firstborn. And when you talked about, the pandemic, or that there's older people, and I just had never thought of it in that way. I mean, we tend to think of it as being babies. That's horrible.
Born. You use the word born, and it's like,
would order the execution of innocent children.
Yeah.
But it could have been, 40, 50-year-old men, right? It just is a new vision to think of it.
Well, I mean, and I think the whole thing is that, let's just kind of open up some of those things that we've learned and have become ingrained in our thinking. And that's the reformation. I truly believe that we kind of are on the verge. Martin Luther's Reformation happened with Gutenberg Press. He was able to put this stuff in the language of the people and get it out to them or whatever. What happens when all of a sudden we live in a computer age and information is just like out there, and again, Hubble telescope. Oh man, does that blow? I mean, how do you deal with God, who's, the Russian cosmonaut said when he was up in space, said, hey, I'm up here. I don't see God. I don't see him anywhere. Where is he? How do we deal with that? How do we cope with that whole thing so that our experiences and our explanations dive in the 21st century? By the way, that firstborn comes from way back when. And Jesus, when Mary and Joseph took Jesus to the temple, it was because he was their firstborn son, and he needed to be redeemed because they were basically given over to the Lord, your firstborn. Okay, that's the story of Samuel too, if you remember. He went to the priest, kind of thing, firstborn son. But you could redeem him. Buy him back. John, I hope you don't have a question.
I just want to appreciate how immersed you are in the story of Scripture. And I think that's a reflection on our LCMS brothers and sisters are probably a little better at really being immersed in that biblical narrative. And that's something that we could be a little better at, but that really shows in what you're talking about. To be able to make the kinds of connections you're doing, you have to know the story.
Yeah. Thank you for the compliment. Okay, but I'm not gonna. I am a recovering Missouri Synod Lutheran. Okay, and I went through the period in the mid-70s when they had a schism. I was a Missouri Synod Lutheran at the time. And I should share with you too that inerrancy was the topic. I mean, you wouldn't have this conversation at that point in time. I don't know how it works now because I left them. But anyways, my professors, I went to a Missouri Synod Lutheran college, and my professors were basically ostracized and thrown out of the school for being heretics. So thank you for the compliment, but you should know my background. I've been taught by heretics and blasphemers. Yeah, right. Anyways, I don't know where else to go with this unless you've got statements, comments, questions. So.
Well, I did think
Yeah.
it was really interesting, the idea that in the blood up there was a statement. I think that's a really interesting.
Yeah. And I think it had to be a real act of faith because I'm not certain that Moses was terribly convincing at what he was doing. Here's a couple more comments, okay? Moses, I could show you a story of Joseph. It's another great, it's humor in the Bible. But anyways, Moses had just spent 40 years in the desert as a shepherd, okay? So now you got this guy coming out of the desert, a shepherd, trying to get an audience with the most powerful person in the land. And if you know anything about Moses, okay, he's trying to tell God, I can't do this. Don't send me, send somebody else. I can't go. And so God says, I'm slow of speech, he says. What if Moses was a stutterer? How do you communicate with Pharaoh when you can't get words out? Okay, so he gives him his brother Aaron to go with him. Okay, so now we got the three stooges minus one. Okay? We got Moses stuttering, maybe talking to Aaron. And then, by the way, Moses was 80 years old.
Wow.
And Aaron was 83. Okay, so the Bible says. Okay, but anyways, you got Moses telling Aaron what to say, and then Aaron is telling Pharaoh what he said. Okay, they do these little acts with the rod and everything like that. He makes a snake out of it or whatever, and then the Pharaoh's magicians do it, and he eats theirs. But okay, he wins on that one, I guess. But his credibility is a little shaky. Okay, they matched him with the blood in the water, kind of thing. So I mean, this isn't working real well here. So I do think that the Israelites, when it came to this last thing, and again, if these are natural occurrences in nature that are happening, fish are dying, frogs are coming out of the land or whatever, you don't automatically see God's hand in that thing. And so it was truly an act of faith from where I'm coming from. Okay, painting the blood of the lamb on the doorstep. I mean, I don't know whether I'm ready for this just yet. One more thing too with that is, as soon as they get over the water, going through the Red Sea, okay, they start grumbling. Okay, you can take Israel out of Egypt, but it takes a lot to get Egypt out of Israel, kind of thing. All right, I've probably blown as much time as I can here, so we need to go. But I agree with you. That was truly an act of faith, I believe, and it's an act of faith that's no different than what we have to experience with our lives and what we're doing. I mean, how do we see God working in all of this?
But it took all
Yeah.
of the previous places. Okay, you did do this so many
Yeah.
times, we
That's-
asked so many times, how many times? What do I have to show to you?
Yeah.
that, And
Yeah.
finally, okay, we get it.
Yep,
You do
yep.
all these things.
Yep, well, that's a little bit of hindsight,
And now, see, that's another thing I wanted to ask you. Because and I don't know, I don't think it's just in the New Testament that the emphasis is on Imago Dei, that we see the face of God and we see it in each other. So
Yes.
that's very different for me to a God, Moses, Old Testament God, who says you are not allowed to see my face.
Oh, yeah, okay. But that reformation of a theology again.
That's what I'm questioning. Is that where that comes from? Is that a reformation?
Yeah, I think the big struggle, why is it the Jews can't believe in Jesus? Okay, I mean, where's the problem here? Okay, how do you identify with God in human form?
So that's
Or
Jesus.
how do I see the divine in you? And I really believe that when we can see the divine in each other, our whole world changes. When we can see the divine in our natural world, our whole attitude changes. Okay, how do you deal with somebody in a negative way if you believe there's the divine in them? Anyways, and I think that was a struggle. So that reformation in the New Testament was saying, I know we're Jews, and I know this is what we believed, and I know you don't make any graven images, but I see God in the flesh, in this person that I call the Christ. He loved all the way to the end. He was on the cross and then still saying, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. They saw the divine. It's beyond human. We got 1 minute left. If we want to stay official. So, okay. Advertisement. Next week, we've got another conversation here, not with me, but with a group from Bridge the Divide here. Okay. And then the week after, which happens to be Palm Sunday, we're going to do I'm going to kind of walk through the Passover meal and see if we can see some Christian imagery even within that meal. The Passover again being the time when Jesus shared with his disciples, here, take it. This is my body. Drink it. This is my blood. Bizarre. A Jew would never drink blood. And Jesus said, it's okay. I think. You guys better get up or else you're drunk. Yeah, go ahead. No, I want you to. Instead of trying to pull your mouse to yeah, just do some rough. My problem is though is that my notes go off the page.
How you doing? I'm doing fine. How about you? I'm hanging in there. Still loving the place you're living.
Yeah, go in a couple other different.